This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. Thank you for downloading and putting us in your earballs this week. We are back with Mr. Boettcher. What are you doing today, Mr. Boettcher?
Well, just working.
Yeah. Well, this is
a security gig.
Yeah, this is a bit odd for us. We're actually doing it during the day here. We're not doing it in the evening. So I'm actually trying to make sure my boss doesn't hit me up on chat or something. So yeah, I'm glad you were able to join me today, Mr. Boettcher. I know you actually work in a traditional office. That's nice. So we wanted to expound upon last week's podcast when we did the SANS Top 20, discussing education, certifications, how to do end user training, why companies only seem to want to do the minimum on end user security training, and whether or not that's effective, and how to make it more effective in many cases. So we brought back Anthony from Cybrary.it. Cybrary.it, for full disclosure, is a sponsor of the Breaking Down Security podcast. And but they do a lot of good work over there. All their training is free. They employ top level people to do video and training for various things like Python and Metasploit. So welcome, Anthony, back to the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Hi, good to be back, Brian.
Cool.
Looking forward to our conversation today.
Nice. All right, so for people who may not have heard the first Cybrary.it podcast with you and Ryan, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you do at Cybrary and maybe a little bit about your credentials.
Sure. At Cybrary, I started out by just helping them out with going through their A+ and Network Plus course. I ended up being the instructor for those two courses. After that, they asked me to keep on helping them developing new courses, writing a little bit of the curriculum, and helping them to identify which instructors may be best for certain courses. So I help Ryan steer where we're going to go next. A little bit about my credentials. I have my A+, Network Plus, Security Plus certifications, as well as an EC Council CEH certification. I've worked as a help desk, desktop support, and then currently nighttime as a systems administrator, as well as work here at Cybrary.
Very nice. Okay. So you guys are, your bread and butter is doing training, and you guys actually have a corporate, if a company was trying to find an end user security training track for their employees, they could come to you and ask for specific training. You're like the Navy had something called the Navy Knowledge Online, where they did regular trainings and stuff, and did end user training and anti-terrorism training. So if a company wanted to come to you guys and discuss, how to do a better job of doing training, they could reach out to you for an end user security training track, right?
Yes, as well as a couple other corporate courses that we're working on, such as HIPAA and a few other courses that we're keeping a little bit close to the vest right now, but we'll be releasing in the near future.
Okay. So I talk about the Navy Knowledge Online and the other company there that I had. I think I mangled it. I don't remember what their name was exactly, but a lot of training that I go to for end user training or end user security training is a lot of, typically it's a video of, usually pretty dated at the time that I've seen them, and the questions are quite easy to the point where you don't even really need to watch the video to pass the questions. I don't know if that's me because of my level of security training or what, but I don't get a lot of benefit out of it because I see everything as being too easy. Is there a way that you guys do it differently than what has historically been what I've seen?
What we're working to do is to move away from multiple choice, fill in the blank, select this or that type of questions where you're just trying to see if the person read through the content that's on the screen. What we want to move more towards and what we've implemented more of is actual situational based type questions. We show you a couple emails and we ask you to identify if it's a phishing email or not based on which components of the email. What makes you think it's suspicious? What would lead you to believe it's not suspicious? Someone who can easily go through those questions and can easily identify which emails are phishing emails or which emails are not phishing emails, then you obviously would be able to do that in a real world environment. So what we're trying to focus on for most enterprises is helping users who would not be able to identify those phishing versus non-phishing emails or social engineering attempts, what have you, to be able to see those and understand the red flags that occur in those. Not just, we aren't worried about teaching people security regulation numbers or HIPAA compliance numbers in a basic end user course. We want to teach them how to identify threats and really what to do once they see it through actual situational practice.
Okay. I was actually kind of worried there when I asked that question because I have not taken your end user security awareness training, so I didn't know if you guys actually did watch the video, answer the questions, and then pass it on. So that was kind of a whoo. Okay, we got that one. Solved that problem. Mr. Boettcher, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Not so far.
Okay.
Where are you going with this, Brian?
Well, the problem that I've got is I was listening to. I'm going to plug friends of ours, Jerry and Andy over at Defensive Security. I was listening to episode 127 with them, and it really resonated with me because they were discussing how training has issues where, and we were talking about the questions and they were talking specifically more about like spear phishing and what have you, that as an information security professional, maybe the reason I don't get a lot out of the training is because my security muscles, for lack of a better term, is a bit more developed than, say, a software developer or a marketing person or a salesperson or the HR people. They cited the example of a recent Ubiquity article about somebody transferred $46 million to an offshore account, basically, and they lost $46 million because somebody got an email from ceo.company@gmail, basically, that said, "Hey, are the CEO, pleased to be sending me the $46 million to this account," that kind of thing. They basically got spearphished, and this person sent the money because they didn't know any better, or they didn't question the fact that the email wasn't necessarily from the CEO. So, they discussed that while we would have looked at that email and said, maybe that's a little suspect, maybe I should question that maybe a lack of training caused the disconnect. And what I was trying to figure out was ways that we could make training more effective for non-InfoSec people. I mean, we look at training and, we poo-poo on it a lot, but what I was trying to figure out is ways that we could, make that more useful for the devs. I mean, we, Megan Wu, Totenkopf, and Ben 10 gave a talk about the psychology of training at Bsides, Las Vegas, and we hope to have them on soon too to discuss the psychological component of how to get people to think differently. I was just trying to see if, how Cybrary was doing it. So, do you believe a scenario-based question and answer makes more sense, or do you think that it should be more of like an in-person training, or do you believe that there's other forms of training that would actually make this more beneficial for non-InfoSec people?
I think that a lot of the issue with current training is exactly what you were talking about earlier. You do it once a year, you do it for an hour to 2 hours, and then you forget about it for the rest of the year. Whereas the way that we try to structure our training and the way that we hope is a a better fit for a lot of companies is giving them shorter modules that can be done in 15, 20 minutes that are assigned once a month to individuals.
Okay.
So you think about security all year long. It becomes something that even as a dev, when you actually have to complete a module once every month, or you have to complete a module when your manager assigns it to you because you failed a random test phishing email that we sent out, then you're thinking about it more actively than you would be if you even if you spent an entire day doing that but only did it once a year.
Okay, so you actually do. You mentioned there that you actually send out test phishing emails. So you do this outside or out of band of the training. So if they do the end user training, is this a service that they would sign up for, that you would send out an email to specific people, or is this a blanket kind of thing?
That's just more of a blanket statement. We don't currently have a service where we can send out those targeted phishing emails. When we set up people with the end user security awareness course, I definitely recommend it, because just as me candidly speaking, I feel like that's a big part of it, is the companies and managements actively testing and actively seeing how well their user security courses are working. Mm-hmm. And if they aren't working and they're not seeing people less likely to click on phishing emails, then they should probably switch to something else. They should probably investigate why it's not helping.
So you kind of shame them into learning security. You clicked on that link. You're lucky it was a fake one. I've gotten emails like that, and Brian, you mentioned flexing your muscles, training all the time, and it keeps us in tune. And we're more in tune with security awareness than most people, just because we're in the field. And I've noticed that too. When I get a phishing email, I'm like, okay, that's a phishing email. But when I get a fake phishing email from our company, I'm like, okay, that's a fake phishing email. I know what that is. I can tell the difference. It's kind of crazy. Our company has started doing that as well. Do you think there could be better types of training? Like, I think before the cast started, Brian, you mentioned like a toothache, right? Everybody knows to brush their teeth, otherwise they'll get cavities. And so they're more likely to brush their teeth than they are to not click links, things like that. But when a kid gets a toothache, they know what that feels like, so they're more apt to brush their teeth. Now, if you actually do a demo and show them what can be gained by hackers when you do click that link, show them exactly what happens by demoing it out, then they know, like when they got a toothache, they know what could happen to them if they do click that link. And I think it's a better visual. They can remember it. They've been there. They saw what happened. Oh, the security dude pwned the CEO, man, and I was there. Stuff like that. You think that's a better way of training? In my opinion, it is.
Definitely. I would certainly agree that actually showing people the dangers that exist with just opening an email attachment is a big part of it, because a lot of people don't understand how easy it is for someone to add something malicious to even just a Word document. And they may look at an attachment that says, oh, you need to enable your macros in order to see this bill that this person just sent you. And they don't understand the risk that's associated with that. Whereas if we show them that there is a risk with enabling macros, there's a risk with opening any attachment that you aren't sure exactly where it came from. That gives them a better understanding.
And then there's a risk by not patching as well. So you can actually demonstrate, okay, here's what happened when you did not patch this. And you can double click a Word doc and show that your computer gets, completely trashed. Whereas if you patched, you can get a little pop-up that says, hey, this thing wants macros enabled. Do you really want to do this? So you get that warning there if you do patch, those kinds of things. What do you recommend companies do for user awareness training? What's your 5-step plan or whatever?
Well, personally, I think the first thing that companies have to take a look at is their technical security team, because no amount of end-user security awareness can be a substitute for an actual security team. If a small company calls us and says, hey, we're having issues with our servers not being patched, we're having an issue with people clicking on links and infecting our users, or we're worried about this possibly happening, then we want to ask them, well, do you actually have security policies in place to prevent this? Do you have people that manage the firewalls and check the logs and see what's going on? And that's really one of the most important things, because that network segmentation can help issues from spreading. Least privilege can help prevent an infected user from, if an account is compromised, it's going to do less damage if it's just a standard user than if someone's actively logging in as a domain administrator. But I think that after you've established that you have a good security team and you have good technical security and you're following those best practices, you do need to have some sort of program where you're actively teaching people and you're actively showing them the risks associated with certain activities like we were talking about. I came across a statistic while we were preparing the end user course, where it's something like 80% of users claim that they haven't had any sort of security training relating to their on-the-job computer use, with only 10% of people saying that they've had a training within the past year. And I feel like a lot of that 10% of people are in those large organizations, but at least having something where you're informing users about the dangers of clicking on links, the dangers of not having a strong password, even if that just starts out as an annual meeting, it's something to try to get the message out there.
Do you believe things like gamification of security training would make it better? I mean, obviously people don't want to spend the time sitting in a conference room while somebody, Ben Stein's the training view or fraud. When you send out, when you have a company like I think the defensive security people mentioned, hey Jerry, Andy, that like fish.me or something like that was a company that actually sends out phishing emails. If you said, okay, if you get an email and you successfully report it according to policy, you'll get a $20 Starbucks card or something like that. Is that something that you feel would benefit the company? Because if you attach something positive to a negative, is that something that you would feel be effective in enhancing training?
Definitely the positive, emphasizing the positive of it is a lot better than continually shaming people. As we mentioned earlier, if someone clicks on a phishing email, we don't want to try to scare them into not clicking on phishing emails and threatening them with things like, oh, we'll write you up, you might get fired. Those are obvious realities of, for the security team guys. But for the average user who just doesn't know, we do want to make that a positive. So gamification definitely can be a big help in, even just from a psychology standpoint, ingraining that in people's mind. You press a button, you get a treat. Well, you don't press this button and you get a treat, type thing.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, reporting to security, that's a big part that we do emphasize in our course, because one of the instructors that we consulted with when we were working on developing the course was Kelly Henderhan, and she's done several internal company audits, and she mentioned that a big part of security issues, for example, when she's tailgating people into buildings, is you will have 4 out of 5 people will say, no, I'm not going to hold the door open for you. But those 4 out of 5 people also will not go to the security desk and say, hey, there's someone standing outside the door. And then by that time, the fifth person is let her in.
Yeah.
So you really need to have a mindset of, not only should I not click this email, I should probably also forward this on to the security team in case this is pretty widespread. That way they can send out a memo, or they can, see what that email's trying to do, what that attachment's trying to do, and keep an eye on that on the network. So reporting is almost just as reporting an issue is almost just as big as not clicking on the issue or not causing the issue in the first place.
So do you see? Obviously, you don't see 100% effectiveness, and if you get a phishing email spam in your company, there are going to be, no matter how well your security awareness program is and how effective it is, you're still going to get people to click those links. And that's a way for the hackers to get in. Okay, so whether it's 5%, 10%, or 50%, they're still in. So what good is it? What good is it to have all this training now? Okay?
I do agree. I would say that it's not going to catch everything. But at that point, that's where having the security structure in place, where we prefer segmentation, we have concepts like least privileges, and we try to contain the damage come into play. And the less percentage of people that are affected by a attack, so say, other than 20% of our users clicking this email, only 5% of the users click on this email. Well, if we have our network segmented properly, if we have users with least privilege, then that may be contained to only 5% of our departments, and it can help us clean it up a bit quicker. Whereas if we have it so that 20% of the people who have clicked that email, then that's going to be a much more widespread issue. So while it may only take one person to get in, if we're layering this end user security on top of our regular security, it's the same. It's almost the same concept of, why should we filter spam if we're still going to have spam that slips through? We filter spam to make sure that we can try to catch as much as possible, so that we keep out the really obvious stuff.
Do you think that security training should be targeted? I mean, obviously the HR people aren't going to need to know about code security. They may be more apt to receive an email from somebody who's a potential hire with an attachment or something. Would you definitely see a benefit in targeting that training based on department? I mean, yeah, the code folks may need to know how to recognize a phishing email, but HR and sales and marketing would need to know more in many cases. Is that something that you drive when you're discussing with companies that that needs to occur?
Having the targeted training is something that we unfortunately don't have right now. But I do agree with the idea that certain departments should get certain different types of training. For example, have either of you worked on help desk before? Just out of curiosity.
Oh yeah, if you're not in IT or IS and haven't worked at help desk, then yeah, I've worked at call desk for about a year at various companies. So yeah.
Okay. So the people working on help desk, in my opinion, they should receive more targeted training on social engineering. They're going to be the ones who are fielding more calls for password resets. The average user isn't going to deal with someone calling them and saying, "Hey, can you reset my password?" Because even if they fell prey to that, they wouldn't be able to. Whereas the call center agents should probably have more training in order to recognize social engineering attempts, be able to recognize people that are maybe trying to exploit their ability as a call center technician to have that additional functionality. So just blanket end user security training that is the same from everyone from the person at the front desk to the systems administrator who's setting up the forests isn't really going to be very effective or as effective as a training that targets those people, so that as you mentioned earlier, you took training where we felt a 3-year-old could pass because we are more in tune with security, we're more in tune with the threats that are out there. And it shouldn't be like that. We should have the targeted training so that people who are more in tune with certain security threats maybe receive a little bit something different. So they're like, oh, well, I wasn't aware that that was as big of an issue. Then they can receive a little bit of additional training. Sorry if that was a little bit rambling there.
No, that was fine. I've been rambling a couple of times on the podcast here. So,
do you have any more stats on the effectiveness of effective training, right, as opposed to non-effective training?
Yeah, auditors love metrics. So, is there a way to, what do you guys want companies or when you go in, what do companies what should companies measure? Is there something you can measure?
I would say the best measure would be if we could if companies are actually able to perform the internal security audits, performing one before they begin end-user training, and then within a couple months after they've begun conducting end-user training. We don't offer, I mentioned earlier, we don't offer the internal security audits or the test phishing emails, but such services like GoFishMe that actually show those metrics for who's clicking on emails, in my opinion, are excellent ways to see if the training is actually effective. If you have an entire company or if you have an entire department actually go through an end-user module that's aimed at preventing people from clicking on phishing emails, and you get the same metrics before and after that module was not effective. If you see only a 5% decrease, it wasn't very effective. There was an article that discussed a training that occurred at West Point, where pretty much the entire student cadre went through an entire day's worth of training on identifying and not clicking on phishing emails. Later that same afternoon, they sent everyone a phishing email, and I believe it was almost like 80% clicked on the phishing email. So that would be an example of a very, very inefficient training.
Do you suggest? Do you give training tracks for being secure, not just at work but also at home? I mean, or like when you're going on travel, because obviously, as people like to travel, or they're at home and they're sitting on their web network connecting with VPN to company assets. Do you are there training tracks for that, or is that something that goes above and beyond in many cases?
Most of our current end user course that we have is completely designed for someone who is not doing any administrative functions on their computer. They aren't setting any of the security policies or anything on their computer, just a standard work end user. But for full disclosure, we may or may not be currently working on a project similar to one designed for home users, but I guess we can leave that for another podcast.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So, I don't know, Mr. Boettcher, takeaways? Anything you've learned today?
Well, I really like what you said about what are the key things. Well, first of all, you have to look at your technical security team. So I wasn't expecting that, and I think that's highly important. The first thing, before you even start a security awareness program, you need to look and see what kind of bodies you have on the security team, and if your security team is going to be effective. That's the first step. That's the thing you need to look at before you even start anything else in security. So, I really like that, what you said, Anthony.
So, Anthony, do you give people options? Like, let's say a company comes in and says, hey, I want training, but I just want the PowerPoint slides with like speaker notes that I can brief people on. Or do you only have the automated version with the lady or the gentleman doing the audio?
We have multiple different types of files that we could give. We haven't yet been approached by anyone looking for just a particular component of the training. We've discussed internally what if we would be willing to give away certain components. I'm not 100% for it, because I feel like the course as it was designed with the audio portions, the visual portions, and the small videos all together. And breaking them up would be a little bit less effective. But I feel like if we redesigned certain segments so that they could be given away and they could be used as full mini courses or mini curriculum, we may be a little bit more open to that.
Okay. All right. So if a company wanted to, reach out to you guys, how would they reach out to you and, to get that end user training?
They can go to our Cybrary.it website, and under our enterprise offerings, we have an area where you can request some more information. Just fill out a little form and request some more information about our course. You can also feel free to shoot us an email at sales@Cybrary.it, and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible.
Cool. And let's say somebody wanted to get a hold of you, to ask more questions, maybe about training or what have you, or maybe they wanted to volunteer for training, to help with curriculum or something. Would they contact you directly, or would they contact Cybrary?
They can go directly to me. Anthony at Cybrary.it is the easiest way to get a hold of me. So I am perfectly fine with taking some emails directly to my personal inbox.
Cool. Are you on Twitter or anything like that where the people could reach you?
I am on Twitter. I actually joined Twitter at the beginning of Cybrary, for Cybrary. I believe my Twitter name is Cyber Anthony. It's been a while since I've been on there.
Okay.
But, Cyber Anthony it looks like. I'm doing a little cheating here looking at my Twitter right now. So they can reach me at Cyber_Anthony if they want to look me up on Twitter.
So before we end the podcast this week, Mr. Boettcher and Kate Brew, as remember when we did episode 30, talking about the blue-red panel at Bsides Austin, Mr. Boettcher moderated part of that panel. He asked some questions about training and if it was effective. I had not been at Bsides Austin, so you're going to hear a lot of answers from industry professionals about how training measures up in the workplace to their opinion. Mano Paul, Michael Goff is on there. You hear Marcus Carey, Josh Sokol, I believe Kevin Johnson's in there at some point. And you hear a lot of things that we brought up in this podcast discuss in the 5 minutes you're about to hear. So he asked the question, and I just wanted to make sure that you got to hear from further industry heavyweights on how they feel, how effective training is. So I'm going to drop that here, and then we'll end up with the finale of the podcast. All right, enjoy.
Given that a certain percentage of users will always be susceptible to social engineering attacks, wouldn't it be better to allocate resources elsewhere, kind of on controls that are more effective?
Sure, if you can find a control that's more effective than the human brain. No, again, like I said, I'm going to prey on your weakness. I've gone as far as to look up a CEO's children, put my name on the sign-out list to get their children out of school, and then have the school mail it to the CEO of a company. You talk about something that'll open up somebody's eyes, I'm not gonna just look at you. I'm looking at a much bigger picture. So in answering that question, no, I don't believe there are controls you can put in place to mitigate that. If I can't get to your work email, I'll go to your Gmail account, or I'll go to your .Clinton account. There's always a way around. Or I could be that friendly security guard in the parking lot who just walks you to your car and talks to you on the way to your car. And I'm not above doing that at all. I have many a costumes I can wear and many a people that I have no fear of talking to. So in response to that, I'm a little despondent on that one. What else?
Yeah, social engineering 100% successful, period.
And Clinton did not have textual relationships with that server.
So the question was, wouldn't it be better to focus elsewhere? And I would argue
Absolutely, unequivocally, yes. The place that you focus is on education. Instead of trying to trick users to clicking links and doing that kind of thing, you educate your users. You spend the time, you spend the money that you have done trying to trick them, and you spend it working with the users, showing them the proper things, giving them training, training videos, whatever you can do to try and educate them on the best thing to do. That is how you spend the time and the money instead of trying to trick them into clicking links.
I'm just going to add, I would say limit that education. A lot of years doing this stuff. Focus at rewarding the reporting. Reward the report. Go buy a whole bunch of Starbucks cards, find the one thing you're going to pick on, and say, I'm going to reward you for reporting malware or funky phishing, whatever you want to pick on for that quarter, year, or training. Focus these people's attention to the one thing that's the highest peak that maybe these guys found, or that, in my opinion, of social engineering. Much more effective because you can kind of overload your users with too much education. The Starbucks cards, man, they work awesome.
I got a question on that because that's the number one thing people are going to use as a phishing attack. Now it's like, hey, here's your free Starbucks gift card. Buy a lottery, pick your thing.
But I'll actually add one aspect to I'll add one aspect to the rewarding good behavior aspect to it, or like not punishing bad behavior. A very important distinction to keep in mind is to also understand the cultural context of the organization that you're operating in. And I'll give that as an example because when you in America, the positive reinforcement goes a long way, right? So you actually reward good behavior. But you go to another country. I'll pick India for that matter because I've worked over there, and I know the culture over there is that you actually don't. They are much more motivated of not being on the bad list, and so negative behavior will be penalized as a strong motivator than positive behavior will be motivated or will be rewarded. So just take your battles, and you may have to actually have a blend in terms of what your strategy and the program is. Having said that though, I've trained thousands of students, hundreds of companies on getting to have their people educated and trained, and you almost have to go down and see what really motivates a company and understand the context of the culture of the company before you can implement a program that is successful.
Yeah, post your URL top 10. You don't want people to visit, just post it in the public area. Man, visits to those sites will drop like a rocket.
So what I see a lot is a lot of people talk about a lot of solutions, but I think that what we do in information security is very unscientific. So we'll hear people talk about all kinds of stuff all the time, and they have no data to support it. And so rewards programs, I've heard it all. People still get on. So I mean, we need to do more data. We need more data and be more scientific. And everybody has an opinion on something, and you know what opinions you like.
Mr. Boettcher, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's a wrap, man.
Right on. So, Mr. Boettcher, how would people find you on Twitter? And
on
Facebook
Twitter,
and stuff?
At Boettcherpwned, BoettcherPwned, and I have no idea what Facebook is, so don't ask.
Oh, well, if you got on there, I know it would be old and busted because, that you're grown up. So we have I am on Twitter at Brian Brake, BryanBrake. The official Breaking Down Security podcast is at BrakeSec, BRAKESEC. We're on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn group. We have a Facebook group, facebook.com/BreakingDownSec. We have a Tumblr. We don't do much with it other than just post episodes, but we have an RSS feed. If you go to www.breakingsecurity, my last name, BRAKEING security.com/RSS. We're on iTunes. If you like what you hear, please feel free to leave a review. I think we've got about a half a dozen, 7 or 8 reviews on iTunes. We have a Patreon if you feel like you need to give us money to help out. The podcast will always be free, but if you want to give, that's great. And still excited about sponsorship opportunities. I know Cybrary was our first sponsor, and we appreciate them for doing that. We have plenty of space left for sponsors if you want to do that. So thank you, Anthony, for coming on. We appreciate you coming on. If you guys have any anything new you guys would like to share with us in the future, you can come on and let us know what you're doing.
Well, my pleasure. It's always great talking with you guys.
Cool. So thank you, everybody, for listening. This is Brian and Brian, Mr. Boettcher, for Breaking Down Security. Have a great week, and we will talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.